March 2014. The damp, cold air enveloped the old South Street area of Philadelphia, where 19th-century red brick buildings were being renovated into modern commercial spaces. The light from Lieutenant Leo Navarro's flashlight pierced through the thick cement dust, shining into a newly drilled hole in the wall. "Central, I need the forensics team up to the 3rd floor right now," he said over the radio, his voice deep and decisive. In front of him was a wooden box sealed with cement, its rusted iron edges buried deep in the wall. When the technician pried off the mortar, a pungent chemical smell escaped, mixed with the dampness of the old apartment. Inside the box, arranged neatly, as if someone had intentionally left them, were an old pair of rubber gloves, 3 unprocessed Polaroid photos, a reel-to-reel tape roll, and a metal card engraved with 3 letters, M.E.W. What started as a routine construction inspection had now become a horrifying discovery. Those 3 letters matched the initials of Mary Ellen Whitford, a Temple University student who disappeared in the summer of 1971. At that time, Mary was only 22 years old, leaving her shift at the Copper Cup coffee shop and walking home, and no one saw her again. The police once launched a large search operation along the Schuylkill River, screening hospitals and train stations, but no trace was found. The last person believed to have seen Mary that day, Thomas Keenan, 24 years old, a law school teaching assistant, owner of a photography studio on Bainbridge Street, was questioned and released due to lack of evidence. The case file quickly went cold, stored in the archive under code #P2114, and from then on became one of Philadelphia's most mysterious missing persons cases. But now, more than 4 decades later, the room where Mary once frequented suddenly revealed its own secret. The wooden box buried sealed in the wall, along with the gloves, the tape roll, and the engraved card, was the first clue since 1971. The investigation was reopened, connecting 2 generations of police and stirring memories of people who thought they had forgotten: the elderly neighbor who once heard screams in the rainy night, the river dock guard who saw a green Ford car stop at midnight, and the roommate who still kept a lock of Mary's hair for 40 years. The pieces gradually emerged. Hair in the gloves matched Mary's DNA. The Bainbridge darkroom was found to have a hollow cement compartment, and the restored tape recorded a desperate female voice pleading. What made this case particularly haunting was that the answer had always been very close. The main suspect was not a stranger, but someone who once taught about justice, lived in the community, attended victim memorial services, looked into the family's eyes for many years, while his secret was sealed right behind the cement wall where she disappeared. Before continuing with this journey spanning more than 40 years, a journey leading to one of Philadelphia's most shocking trials, please subscribe and like the video to support the channel. Stories like the case of Mary Ellen Whitford show that although time can dust over evidence, the truth still has a way to return to the light, and justice, though late, always comes. June 5, 1971. The South Street area of Philadelphia was steeped in the muggy early summer air. A light rain had just stopped, leaving a layer of moisture on the brick-paved streets, reflecting the neon lights from late opening bars and shops. Soul music echoed mixed with laughter and chatter, the characteristic sounds of the artist's neighborhood in an era when everything seemed to be changing. At the corner of 12th Street, in the small coffee shop named the Copper Cup, Mary Ellen Whitford was finishing her evening shift. The 22-year-old girl, an art student at Temple University, was the last one to leave the shop. She cleaned up the bar counter, put back the notebook, and packed away the unwashed film rolls for her personal photo project that she hoped to exhibit at the end of the semester. Her coworkers described Mary as careful, quiet but always punctual, rarely going anywhere alone at night. Around 10:15, Mary said goodbye to her colleagues, put on her thin gray coat, carried her canvas bag with the films, and stepped out of the shop. Outside, the smell of rain still lingered, the streetlights casting long shadows with her steps. The last witness saw Mary walking along South Street, turning toward Bainbridge Street, the small road leading toward the Schuylkill River, where she often took a shortcut to her dorm. A newspaper vendor said she stopped at his stand for a few seconds to ask the time, her voice soft and somewhat hurried. Then she continued walking, her slender figure gradually disappearing among the dim lights. That night, many people remembered the sound of a car engine starting from a nearby alley, but no one was sure if it was related to the student. The city continued its familiar flow, train horns, music, the thinning rain. No one knew that a person had vanished from there forever. The next morning, at Temple University's dorm area, Mary's roommate, Margaret Duval, noticed her bed was still untouched as when she left. Her second coat was still hanging behind the door, her wallet and some personal items still in place. Margaret called the coffee shop, then a few classmates, but no one had seen Mary since the previous evening. By noon, worry turned to panic. She went to the South Philadelphia police station to report her friend missing. The duty officer asked a few brief questions. They were used to cases of students leaving home for a few days without notice, but Margaret insisted this wasn't the type of person who would disappear on her own. After taking the statement, the officer typed slowly on the typewriter, filling out the report form. Female victim, 22 years old, 5'6" tall, brown hair, missing since the night of June 5, 1971. The missing person report was filed at 9:45 a.m., temporarily numbered #P2114. That afternoon, the first two officers from the South Philadelphia Police Department were dispatched to Temple University's dorm to begin the search. They collected an identification photo from Mary Ellen Whitford's documents, noted her height, hair color, the clothes she wore when leaving the coffee shop. All information was quickly forwarded to shifts and nearby stations. In the file, this was still just an ordinary missing person case, but the persistence of the roommate and the fact that Mary was a principled person made Lieutenant George Hanlon, the shift supervisor, decide to expand the search right that day. The initial investigation team was sent to South Street, the neighborhood where Mary worked. They inquired at the Copper Cup, where the owner and two co-workers confirmed she left around 10:15 p.m., carrying her film bag for her personal photo project. A newspaper vendor at the corner of 12th Street said she passed by, asked the time and turned toward Bainbridge Street. A woman living on the second floor of a nearby building said she heard a car engine rev loudly right after the clock struck 10:30, then silence. No one saw the person's face in the car. All statements matched within the short half-hour window when Mary disappeared. In the afternoon, the police expanded the search around the Schuylkill River area, where many students often went to take photos. The rescue team used motorboats to scan along the riverbank, carrying flashlights and handheld speakers, calling her name in the humid wind heavy with oil and moss smells. On shore, other officers waded through tall grass in Fairmount Park, hoping to find personal items, film bag, wallet, or anything that could suggest a trace. As night fell, only the green lights of patrol cars reflected on the water, nothing but a few scraps of fabric and wet wrappers. The next morning, the search expanded to bus stops and train stations. Passenger lists leaving Philadelphia on the night of June 5 were checked, but no one matched the description. Hospitals were inquired. The city morgue was screened, all results empty. The investigation team returned to the dorm to check Mary's belongings. In her desk drawer, they found a notebook recording work schedules and a few scribbles. Meet T at studio, last talk. The initial T was unclear, but enough to make Hanlon request a screening of people with work connections to Mary. Meanwhile, a series of new statements were received. A taxi driver claimed to have seen a brown-haired girl in a gray coat get into a car with a man near the South Street Bridge around 10:30 p.m. A security guard at the Southern Dock area said he heard a woman's arguing voice, but the sound echoed far in the wind, indistinguishable. The police noted all information, redrew the map of Mary's usual route from the coffee shop to the dorm. The map gradually filled with red marks, all stopping around Bainbridge Street. On June 8, the Philadelphia Daily News published a small article, Temple University Student Missing, Police Investigating. The story hadn't attracted attention yet, but for the investigation team, the silence of all traces had begun to seem unusual. Hanlon ordered a reopening of the nighttime search area, this time with additional police dogs. They sniffed along the street leading to the river, then lost the scent at the bridge edge. One officer wrote in the report, "Possibility victim moved by vehicle or taken from this area." On the fourth day, Mary's family, parents and brother, arrived at the scene, printing hundreds of flyers themselves. They posted them on poles, stations, shops. Someone called the station, saying they saw a brown-haired girl, like in the photo, sitting in a dark green Ford car, but didn't remember the license plate. The information was noted, but lacked verifiable details. By the end of the week, the official search shifted from emergency to periodic follow-up. No scene, no evidence, no direct witnesses. In the summary minutes, Hanlon wrote briefly, "No signs of violence detected. No personal items recovered. Cause of disappearance, not yet determined." At the bottom corner of the report, a simple typed line appeared. "Missing adult, unknown cause." A thin file, no evidence, no direction. Only a few vague statements left, and a cold void between South Street and the Schuylkill riverbank, where Mary Ellen Whitford was last seen. The missing adult, unknown cause file was signed and stored in the metal cabinet, but Lieutenant George Hanlon still felt the case wasn't over. A week after the search ended without results, he requested two young investigators, Officer Dennis McGraw and Frank Molina, to review Mary Ellen Whitford's entire schedule in the days before her disappearance. Both started from Temple University, where Mary studied art and was rated an excellent student, outstanding with her personal photo project on urban life. According to friends, she spent most of her time on her graduation project, a series of black and white photos of old neighborhoods around South Street. McGraw collected gradebooks, course registration records, and library history of Mary. In the borrowing log, he saw many materials on photography and film developing chemicals. When asking the supervising instructors, all said Mary worked very seriously. But lately she often used an external darkroom. This information led them to a familiar address in the file, Studio 414 Bainbridge Street, where some Temple students rented space to develop film and do personal work. The renter was Thomas Keenan, 24 years old, a law school teaching assistant, who was also studying visual arts as a personal hobby. According to the room rental log, Mary had used this studio at least 6 times in May 1971. People in the building confirmed they had seen her coming and going with camera and film bag, usually in the afternoon or early evening. A neighbor, Mrs. Edna Crawford, said that the young brown-haired girl appeared last in early June, carrying lenses and a large bag. That detail startled McGraw. If true, then Bainbridge Street was the last area Mary was seen, matching the direction described by witnesses. On June 14th, Keenan was invited to police headquarters for questioning. The minutes recorded him arriving on time, neatly dressed, appearing calm and cooperative. When asked, Keenan confirmed knowing Mary through a photography workshop at school and occasionally lending her the darkroom in the studio. On the evening of June 5th, he said he was home alone in the Germantown area, watching news and organizing documents. When police asked if anyone could confirm, he said, "No, I was alone." The statement was short, emotionless, no inconsistencies, but completely lacked alibi evidence. The police sent 2 people to check the studio at Bainbridge Street. Outside was a 4-story red brick building, old windows overlooking the street. Ground floor rented for photo repair shop, 2nd and 3rd floors divided into small workrooms. Keenan's room on the 3rd floor, gray-painted door marked 414. When opened, the smell of film developing chemicals and oil paint hit. Inside was dark and damp, with several photos still drying on the table. The floor newly painted, the paint still shiny. Police asked why. Keenan said, "Just repaired to avoid chemical smells sticking." No clear physical traces, no blood, no suspicious items. A few miscellaneous evidence samples were taken, including a white powder piece and a partially burned fabric fiber. Meanwhile, McGraw continued interviewing surrounding residents. A notable witness, Mrs. Edna said that, on the night Mary disappeared, she heard a woman's loud voice, like arguing, coming from the third floor, followed by a loud iron door slam. About half an hour later, a car starting sound, then fading in the rain. Another Mr. Louis, living on the adjacent floor, confirmed hearing footsteps and heavy object dragging down the stairs, but he thought it was just someone moving things. When the information was compiled, McGraw and Melena's report began pointing in the same direction. All last traces of Mary led to Studio 414 Bainbridge Street and the man named Thomas Keenan. He was the last person who could have contacted her, owned the place she frequented, and had a blank period on the night she disappeared. But no specific evidence, no direct witness seeing them meet. No Mary's items at the scene. On June 18th, Lieutenant Hanlon submitted the preliminary minutes to the city prosecutor's office. In the suspicion notes section, he wrote, "High possibility victim contacted Thomas Keenan on the night of disappearance." However, causal connection or criminal signs not yet determined. In the personal comments section, Hanlon added just one short line, "Feels like this doesn't stop at missing." The case remained in open investigation status, and the name Thomas Keenan began appearing frequently in the police department's internal reports. A sign that, though not enough evidence, the young man had entered the center of suspicion in the investigation. 2 days after the first questioning session, when Officer McGraw and Melena's notes were forwarded to Lieutenant Hanlon's desk, he decided to sign an official search warrant for Studio 414 Bainbridge Street. Mary Ellen Whitford's disappearance had dragged on for nearly 2 weeks without any viable clues, and now all data, from direction of movement, witness statements to time of lost contact, converged on the same address. Hanlon wanted to see with his own eyes the last place the student girl might have set foot. On the afternoon of June 20th, 1971, 3 police officers, along with a forensics expert, carrying cameras, sample boxes, and ultraviolet lights, arrived at the old red brick building in the middle of Bainbridge Street. Door number 414 opened as Keenan appeared in a neat white shirt, his face composed. He had been notified of the search and appeared cooperative. "Feel free to inspect. I have nothing to hide," he said briefly, then stepped inside. The room was about over 30 square meters, windows sealed with black paper, only dim yellow light reflecting on framed photos hanging along the walls. In the middle was a large wooden table piled with photo washing tools, chemical bottles, developing paper, and a few drying photos. The nitrate chemical and photo glue smell was overpowering to the point of headache, mixed with new paint smell. Underfoot, the wooden floor was covered with a shiny gray paint layer, like recently finished. The police noted that detail first. In the initial report, the room was described as unusually clean, no dust, newly swept floor. When the forensics expert turned on the ultraviolet light to scan for blood spatter or body fluids, the blue light swept over walls and floor sections. Nothing glowed. Only in the corner, near the film washing sink, they found a small patch with a darker stain. When asked, Keenan replied immediately, "Developing chemical stain, it eats paint." That sample was taken for analysis. They continued checking the darkroom, where there was only a small red bulb and photo washing trays. On the floor, Melena bent down to pick up a scorched fabric fiber, small but clearly once exposed to fire or chemicals. In the wall corner was a partially burned electrical wire, the end still smelling burnt. Both were sealed in plastic bags. Additionally, a fine white dust layer covered the table and sink. What Keenan said was photo washing powder. The expert took samples into glass vials. Throughout the search, Keenan always followed behind, hands in pockets, silently watching. When Melena asked finally, "When did you repaint the floor?" he only replied, "Last week I redid everything to deodorize." The answer was recorded, verbatim, in the minutes. They found no signs of violence. No blood, no heavy drag marks, no shards or shoe prints. The room looked like it had been thoroughly cleaned before the investigation team arrived. Outside, Miss Edna Crawford, the second-floor neighbor, stood on the stairs looking down, whispering to McGraw that the missing girl definitely came here. She affirmed hearing a woman's loud voice and the iron door slamming on the night of June 5th. When asked why not report earlier, she just bowed her head. "I thought it was a couple arguing their private matter." That statement was added immediately to the same-day report. That evening, in the small meeting room of the precinct, the officers spread the scene photos on the table. McGraw tapped his pen on the photo of the newly painted floor. If this was once the scene, he had time to erase all traces. Hanlon agreed, but couldn't rely on feeling. All samples must be examined: paint, burned fabric, electrical wire, and white powder. While waiting for results, Keenan remained a witness, not an official suspect. He left the station at 9 p.m., his demeanor strangely calm. The preliminary examination report was sent back 3 days later. The white powder sample was indeed a compound used in common film developing solution. No blood traces. The burned electrical wire was damaged due to overload. No organic tissue. The burned fabric fiber originated from cotton, unable to determine original item. All unable to determine legal value. None of it proved Mary was ever in the studio, let alone enough to charge the room's owner. Hanlon ordered the end of the search and temporary closure of the scene file. However, he kept Keenan on the unofficial monitoring list. In his notebook, he wrote briefly one line: "No scene, but smell of concealment." The following days, police still quietly passed through Bainbridge Street a few times. The yellow light from the dark room still shone steadily every night. And Thomas Keenan was still there, opening the door, brewing coffee, as if the investigation never existed. But for Hanlon and his team, that room, with its overpowering chemical smell and too perfect new paint layer, had become the silent center of Mary Ellen Whitford's disappearance. A place seemingly harmless, but containing within it the chilling feeling of something that had been wiped clean. After the forensics lab results came back, showing no traces of crime, Lieutenant Hanlon couldn't hide his disappointment. The room on Bainbridge had clearly been thoroughly cleaned, too clean for someone just doing amateur photo developing. However, no physical evidence was strong enough to counter Thomas Keenan's statements. Everything on paper was perfect: valid studio lease contract, floor repair evidence, recorded in paint purchase invoice, even a chemical room certification from Temple. Legally, they had nothing to hold him. But Hanlon knew well, the guilty don't always leave blood. On June 23, 1971, he decided to initiate secret surveillance. 2 young officers, McGraw and Molina, were assigned to observe Keenan for 2 weeks, recording all his daily activities. From morning to night, they took turns sitting in the department's Ford car, parked about 2 blocks from the studio. Keenan had a fairly regular schedule: left home in Germantown at 8 a.m., went to Temple Lecture Hall, afternoon stopped at Bainbridge Studio, stayed until evening. No one else entered or exited with him. No woman matching Mary's description appeared. Everything was calm to the point of suspicion. The night of June 27, McGraw noted in his report, Keenan left the studio at 10:40 p.m., carrying 2 large black bags, placed in the trunk of a dark green Ford. Departed the scene at 10:45 p.m., heading toward the Schuylkill dock. Molina followed in his car, but lost track when Keenan's vehicle turned onto Front Street toward the river. The next morning, they returned to check the old dock area and private marina, but found no traces. A night shift security guard recalled that around midnight, a tall, thin man driving a green Ford arrived at the dock, opened the trunk, and unloaded something heavy, tightly wrapped in cloth. The man stayed no more than 10 minutes before leaving. When shown Keenan's photo, the guard nodded slowly. "Looks very similar, but I'm not sure. It was drizzling that night." McGraw immediately reported back. The police department dispatched a small team to search the dock. They scoured the marina area, shining lights into each compartment, but found nothing suspicious except fresh mud marks and some old tarps. Under the water, the summer river was murky, heavy with the smell of oil. The rescue team scanned a section of the river with grappling hooks, but found no notable items. With no physical evidence, the witness's statement was merely speculative. On June 30th, Keenan abruptly vacated the Bainbridge studio. McGraw saw him load several photo frames, a suitcase, and a cardboard box. He locked the room, returned the key to the building owner, saying he was temporarily stopping the lease due to the end of the semester. When asked, Keenan only smiled, "I need a summer break, that place is too damp." The room's door was sealed with tape until a new tenant took over. A week later, word spread that Keenan had sold the green Ford. The owner of a small auto shop on South Street recounted that a man came to trade the car for cash, but the deal fell through. No receipt, no registration record. The car's license plate ceased to exist in the system after July 1971. All traces of the Ford vanished, just like its owner. For Hanlon, each small detail heightened suspicion, but he knew well that charges couldn't be built on instinct alone. His summary report to the district prosecutor was brief. 2-week surveillance, no direct criminal activity observed. No physical evidence or victim traces found. River dock witness, unable to confirm suspect identity. The conclusion was typed in bold. Insufficient grounds for prosecution. By early July, the surveillance was terminated. Keenan was officially removed from the watch list. He returned to teaching at Temple University as if nothing had happened. Bainbridge Street returned to its quiet state. The dark room was locked, the chemical smell fading over time. But for those involved in the investigation, the feeling of unfinished business lingered. McGraw, in his handwritten note to Hanlon, wrote one final line, "That man knows something we don't." And though the case was officially shelved by mid-July 1971, not one person on the team believed Mary Ellen Whitford's case was just a voluntary disappearance. They were accustomed to the silence of nighttime streets, but the silence around Keenan, with the vanished car, the repainted room, and the mysterious trip to the river dock, carried a different tone. It wasn't the silence of chance, but of someone who had erased all traces before the light of justice could reach. And from there, the Mary Whitford case began sinking into a shadow that stretched over 40 years. When the surveillance was canceled, the atmosphere in the investigation room grew heavy. Lieutenant Hanlon, who rarely let emotions interfere with work, sat for a long time before the report on Mary Ellen Whitford, barely 20 pages thick. Each line ended with insufficient grounds for prosecution, cold and meaningless. But amidst those lines, Hanlon still felt a gap, something unexplained. A well-behaved student, no debts, no boyfriend, no history of depression, suddenly vanished after leaving work, and the last person connected to her cleaned everything, repainted the floor, and sold his car within 3 weeks. To Hanlon, these couldn't just be coincidences. By mid-July 1971, he ordered a full review of the case file. McGraw and Molina were tasked again. This time, not surveillance, but supplemental paperwork investigation. They revisited every witness, cross-checked old statements, and re-examined places Mary frequented. In the file, Bainbridge Street was underlined in red, marked with Studio, TK. On the next page, McGraw added, "Check boat registration under Keenan." A week later, results from the Department of Transportation showed Keenan owned a small Crestliner boat, registered for use at the Schuylkill dock since 1970. When questioned, Keenan confirmed it was his father's fishing boat, still moored at the old dock but rarely used. The investigation team checked it. The silver boat, old and dusty, was covered in grime. Below deck, they found some stains and fabric wrapped around a floorboard. All were scraped for samples and sent for testing. The forensics lab results came back 3 days later, origin undetermined. No DNA traces, no organic tissue. The stains were identified as a mix of oil and cleaning chemicals. Hanlon requested a re-interview with Mrs. Edna Crawford, the neighbor who heard a woman's screams on the night of the disappearance. She stood by what she heard, but couldn't confirm the exact date or time. When shown Mary's photo, she said, "I only heard the voice, didn't see the face." Another witness, Mr. Louis, from the adjacent floor had moved. The new tenant knew nothing about the case. The police approached the Bainbridge building landlord, an elderly man named Raymond Kessler, who confirmed Keenan vacated in late June, paid in full, left no belongings. He said he wanted a summer break. "I didn't see anything odd," Kessler recalled. The reports repeated the same content. Nothing new. The samples collected from the initial search, white powder, burned fabric, electrical wire, were sent for a second analysis to detect trace metals or DNA. But the technology then was too limited. The lab responded after 2 weeks. No conclusive results. During this time, Keenan seemed to have settled back into normal life. He resumed teaching at Temple University, attended workshops, published small research papers in legal journals. No one at the school knew he had been investigated in a missing person case. In the media, the Mary Whitford case faded from headlines. Other, more dramatic cases took over: riots in Camden, drug crimes, bank robberies in the sweltering summer. Meanwhile, Mary's file remained just a few photos and frontline police reports, sitting quietly on an iron shelf. By late August, McGraw was reassigned to a new case. Before leaving, he submitted his notebook to Hanlon, which included, "We haven't found a body, but that doesn't mean there's no crime. Studio 414 may have been cleaned too thoroughly." Hanlon read that sentence repeatedly, then closed the notebook without comment. He had sent a request to expand the investigation to the prosecutor's office, but it was returned with a note: "No new evidence, no legal basis to continue." By October 1971, an official document was issued. The Mary Ellen Whitford case was kept in open but inactive status. Internally, this meant no one was directly responsible, and the file would only be reviewed with new findings. The investigators gradually transferred or retired. Bainbridge Street remained bustling, but door 414 no longer lit up. Hanlon visited the place one last time late that year. A new "For Rent" sign hung on the door, the faint smell of old paint lingering as he gently pushed the wooden door. He stood in the empty room, looking at the flawless floor, knowing he'd never find anything there again. In the temporary closing report, he wrote, "No conclusive evidence, no signs of crime, case paused pending new information." The Mary Ellen Whitford file, numbered #P2114, was moved to the basement archive of the Philadelphia Police Department on November 2, 1971. It remained classified as an open case, but with no one in charge. Room 414, Bainbridge, closed, gathering dust, and the name Mary E. Whitford on the missing persons board faded over time. In Philadelphia, that winter came early and cold, and with it, the case of the 22-year-old student officially fell into silence. As the winter of 1971 passed, the Mary Ellen Whitford case was gradually swept into the city's busy orbit. New cases, daily crime reports, and successive social events quickly pushed an open but inactive file like #P2114 to the bottom of the list. By 1972, Lieutenant Hanlon was reassigned to another unit. The investigation team temporarily disbanded. His personal notebook with the final note, "No scene but smell of concealment," remained in his office drawer. No one continued the pursuit. The red brick building at 414 Bainbridge Street also changed. In early 1973, a new owner bought the entire third floor to use as storage for the photo shop below. They hired workers to fix the electrical and water systems, sealing the dark room with cement, deeming it damp and with an unpleasant chemical smell. When the final bricks were mortared, the room last searched in 1971 vanished from sight. No one in the construction crew knew they had just buried a scene that was never decoded. As for Thomas Keenan, the man once at the center of suspicion, he seemed to leave the matter behind with uncanny ease. After the summer of 1971, he left Temple, quit his teaching assistant role, and pursued a law degree at the University of Pennsylvania. By 1975, Keenan opened a private law firm, specializing in corporate law. Clients described him as intelligent, reserved, with an impressive ability to control emotions, qualities that led to collaborations with major regional companies. No one in legal circles knew or mentioned his past connection to a missing person case. Even when the press occasionally revisited the Mary Whitford case in cold file sections in the late 1970s, Keenan's name was no longer linked. In the basement archive of the Philadelphia Police Department, case file #P2114 gathered dust. Inside were a few scene photos, a copy of the missing person report, witness statements, and yellowed forensic results. Next to it sat hundreds of other files, unresolved, without evidence, without prosecutions. The storage system then had no periodic review process, and with each personnel change, open but inactive files were simply shelved. Occasionally, a rookie officer assigned to archive duty would flip through old files to practice reading reports, then close them. The name Mary E. Whitford meant nothing beyond a number in the catalog. No family members came to inquire. Her mother passed in 1974. Her father, former officer Joseph Whitford, died 2 years later in a veterans hospital. The Norristown house was sold, belongings moved, and thus, Mary's disappearance had no one left to pursue it. Throughout the 1970s, Philadelphia underwent rapid change, old neighborhoods demolished, new highways built, residents moved, many old buildings razed or renovated. When construction workers passed through Bainbridge Street, they didn't know that behind the cold gray cement was a room holding an unsolved mystery. New walls went up, the chemical smell from years ago dissipated, leaving only yellowed files in the dark. By 1980, no one in the Philadelphia Police Department clearly remembered the case existed. The Mary Ellen Whitford file was never closed, but also never reopened. It was just a name in the unresolved cases prior 1975 list. Somewhere in the city, the once suspected man lived peacefully, continuing his career, while those who investigated had retired or forgotten. The Mary Ellen Whitford case officially entered a dormant state, a silence stretching over 40 years, waiting for someone to accidentally break through the hardened cement on Bainbridge Street and awaken the old shadows of the summer of 1971. 43 years later, in March 2014, the South Street area, once vibrant with bars, record shops, and artist cafes, had transformed completely. The ancient red brick buildings were being renovated into modern shops and upscale apartments. Among them was a 4-story house on the old Bainbridge Street, now merged into the expanded South Street area. The renovation was handled by Hawthorne Restoration, specializing in restoring Victorian-era buildings. One weekend morning, workers drilled through a cement wall on the 3rd floor to create a new passage between rooms. The sound of metal hitting something hard echoed, unusual, as if something was inside the wall. The worker, Brian Keller, the first to notice, later recounted that when drilling a few inches deeper, the bit hit something denser than cement, then recoiled. They chipped lightly, the mortar fell away, revealing a rectangular wooden block wrapped tightly in thick tar paper and mortared around. No label, no identifying marks. When the wrapping was removed, a musty smell mixed with old chemicals wafted out, forcing the crew to pause. In the flashlight's beam, a dark wooden box emerged, about the size of a small suitcase, its iron edges rusted. The lock on the front was encased in hardened cement. It took nearly 10 minutes to pry open the lid, and when it popped, a smell of burnt plastic and photo-developing chemicals filled the room. Inside, everything was arranged with chilling precision. At the top was a pair of gray rubber gloves, decayed but still intact. Below was a small oval metal tag, clearly engraved with 3 letters, M.E.W. Capitalized, neatly aligned, as if someone deliberately left a marker. Next to it was an old plastic bag holding 3 unprocessed Polaroid photos. The film still intact but browned from oxidation. At the bottom, a metal reel-to-reel tape sat neatly in a round case, its exterior faintly marked in pencil, 6/71. No one in the crew understood what they were looking at, but the room's unnatural silence made everyone uneasy. Brian Keller, a former veteran, decided not to open anything further and called the police. 15 minutes later, 2 officers from the South Division Police Department arrived. They filed a preliminary report, photographed the scene, and asked everyone to leave the area. When informed the building was once part of the old Bainbridge Street, a young officer remarked, "This was the area with a photo studio before." That comment made the team pause. That afternoon, the building was sealed off, the scene handed to the Philadelphia PD's cold case unit, responsible for reviewing long-standing missing person cases. Lieutenant Leo Navarro, head of the unit, received the report during a meeting at headquarters. He went to the scene immediately. According to the initial report, the building was the old 414 Bainbridge Street, merged into the renovation project after multiple ownership changes. Upon hearing about the M.E.W. engraved on the metal tag, Navarro immediately requested the archive to pull the file. The electronic system retrieved Mary Ellen Whitford, missing 1971, case hash P2114. When Navarro entered the room where the box was found, crumbled cement littered the floor, the walls stained yellow-brown. Light from the window fell on the wooden box in the room's center, its rusted metal surface glinting dully. He put on gloves, bent down to examine each item inside, his gaze lingering on the metal tag. Despite over 40 years, the engraving remained clear. M.E.W., the same 3 letters as the victim missing since 1971. The forensics team from the Criminalistics Division was dispatched that evening. They used a portable dehumidifier to stabilize the air, sealing the entire scene. The items were numbered, photographed, and packaged separately. As the evidence bags were sealed, Navarro stood looking at the silent room. No more drilling sounds, no voices, only the faint smell of old chemicals lingered, the same smell that made investigators in 1971 suspicious yet helpless. He flipped through the old file in hand, reading Lieutenant Hanlon's italicized note from 4 decades ago. No scene, but smell of concealment. Now that smell emerged once more from the Bainbridge walls. And this time, it carried the first evidence in over 40 years of silence. A wooden box, a name tag, a tape reel, and the memory of a disappearance thought to be buried forever with the cement of that year. The next morning, Lieutenant Leo Navarro was at the Philadelphia Police Department's cold case unit headquarters. On his desk, the wooden box and seizure report sat next to the over 400-page old file on Mary Ellen Whitford's 1971 disappearance. The open, unresolved heading on the cover had faded to near illegibility. Navarro placed his hand on the file's corner, flipping slowly, the rustle of paper mixing with the sound of rain outside the window. He was familiar with this feeling, the moment a buried case came alive from a piece of evidence. But this time was different. The address in the original file, 414 Bainbridge Street, was exactly where the box was found yesterday. Navarro called the department's archive, requesting copies of the entire 1971 file, including Lieutenant Hanlon's reports, Thomas Keenan's interrogation transcripts, scene photos, and witness lists. Within 2 hours, the yellowed documents arrived. He read continuously through the morning, underlining key details. Keenan, photo studio owner, 24 years old, Temple University Law, teaching assistant, owned a small boat registered at Schuylkill Dock, questioned twice. No evidence, no prosecution. When he reached the 414 Bainbridge scene inspection page, Navarro paused for a long time. In the photo, the room looked identical to the 2014 forensics team's description: gray-painted floor, freshly coated walls, scattered film developing tools. He knew immediately that the cement the workers broke through was the same wall, repaired right after police left that year. The chemical smell noted by Hanlon's team reappeared in the new report. Too many coincidences. That afternoon, Navarro called an urgent meeting in the cold case unit's small conference room. 4 people attended: investigator Alicia Boone, specializing in evidence review, Carlos Mendez, handling witness tracing, and 2 forensic analysts from the technical division. He pinned 2 photos on the whiteboard, one of the 1971 Bainbridge scene, one of the 2014 wooden box discovery. These 2 images are 43 years apart, he said. But everything between them seems just a pause in time. Boone was tasked with cross-referencing the entire old file with the new evidence. She reviewed the 1971 search report. It mentioned white powder sample, burned wire, scorched fabric, but back then, testing technology was too limited. Navarro ordered any remaining old samples, if still in storage, sent to a modern lab for DNA and chemical trace analysis. Mendez, meanwhile, began tracking Thomas Keenan, the old suspect, now likely over 70. Using civilian data, within hours, they confirmed Keenan was still living in Chestnut Hill, a northwest Philadelphia suburb. Retired, once a prominent commercial lawyer, no criminal record, never left Pennsylvania. Navarro requested the team collect his civilian records, identification photos, and current address. Looking at the driver's license photo, Keenan's face at 74 still carried the same cold demeanor as the black and white interrogation photo from 1971. In an internal memo, Navarro wrote, "Identified primary suspect, Thomas Keenan, DOB 1947, current address, 9134. Evergreen Avenue, Chestnut Hill. Suspect was the last person linked to Mary Ellen Whitford and owned the room where evidence was found. Prioritize re-evaluating the entire original file and tracing old witnesses." Boone reviewed the 1971 witness list. Of the 8 individuals, only 4 were still alive. Edna Crawford, second-floor neighbor, 87 years old, now living in a nursing home in West Philly. Frank Molina, former investigating officer, retired in Florida. Raymond Kessler, Bainbridge building landlord, now 90 years old, in poor health. Margaret Duval, Mary's roommate, now 64 years old, residing in Pittsburgh. Navarro noted, "Contact each person, take supplemental statements, verify related memories." On March 10th, a brief summary was submitted to the Philadelphia Police Department director. Based on new evidence found at 414 Bainbridge Street, there is reason to believe the 1971 disappearance of Mary Ellen Whitford involves criminal elements. Request to reopen the case and transfer cold case investigation from archived to active status. The decision was signed that same afternoon. After 43 years, the Mary Ellen Whitford case was officially reopened for investigation. Navarro looked out the window where a light spring rain fell on the harbor. In his mind, the 3 letters engraved on the metal tag. M.E.W. and Hanlon's old note, which he reread all last night, echoed, "No scene, but smell of concealment." This time, that smell had returned, leading them straight to the home of a 74-year-old man who had stood on the edge of suspicion and guilt, untouchable for over 4 decades. 3 days after the case was officially reopened, all evidence collected from the old Bainbridge room was sent to the Pennsylvania State Forensics Laboratory for the first analysis since 1971. Lieutenant Leo Navarro was personally present at the handover. The wooden box was placed in an isolation chamber, its lid slightly open to prevent oxidation. Technicians sequentially sampled hair, fabric fibers, surface dust, adhesive residue, and the metal tag. Each item was coated, sealed, and isolated from air. The first sample, a long, light brown hair caught inside the glove, was sent for DNA analysis. Navarro observed through the glass, silent. He knew this could be the only link between 1971 and 2014. Using modern technology, technicians applied mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA analysis, a method capable of identifying degraded samples through maternal lineage. In the file, Mary's roommate, Margaret Duval, had kept a lock of Mary's hair in a student scrapbook, and when contacted, she agreed to provide it for comparison. The results came after 72 hours of waiting. The mitochondrial DNA from the hair in the glove matched Mary's stored sample perfectly. The error rate was so low, no second verification was needed. No one in the room needed to say more. This match was enough to confirm the evidence in the wooden box was directly linked to Mary Ellen Whitford. After 43 years, her biological trace was found for the first time. Concurrently, the chemical analysis team examined the dust and residue on the gloves. Under an electron microscope, tiny particles glowed silver and gray-white. Tests confirmed they were silver halide, a key component in photographic developing solutions, and epoxy resin, a common industrial adhesive in 1970s darkrooms. These substances couldn't appear randomly outside a photo processing environment. This matched the 1971 file's description of Keenan's room perfectly. At the materials analysis level, technicians examined the dust on the wooden box's surface. Beneath the decayed wood were particles containing calcium, silica, and aluminum oxide, typical of industrial cement dust. Corrosion marks indicated the box had been buried or sealed in construction material for years. When compared to the current Bainbridge building's cement, the composition matched 96%. Same cement type, same production period. Clear evidence the box had been in that wall for decades. While awaiting final results, Navarro ordered the technical team to restore the 3 unprocessed Polaroid photos found in the box. Using multispectral light scanning, they recovered blurry images of a room's stained brick walls, a wooden table frame, and a red light. Unmistakably a dark room. In the left corner, faint as a shadow, was a figure in a light-colored shirt standing by a photo drying rack. Though the face couldn't be identified, the position and setting matched the description of Thomas Keenan's room exactly. The evidence began to connect: Mary's hair in the glove, darkroom chemicals, the box sealed in the wall, images of the Bainbridge room, all within the same space. As Navarro left the forensics lab at day's end, he paused before the glass case holding the wooden box. The silent items inside told a story the previous generation couldn't hear. That evening, at the cold case unit office, the investigation team held a brief meeting. Navarro laid out the restored Polaroid photos and the mtDNA results printout. "We're no longer talking about a hypothesis," he said, voice low and firm. "This is tangible evidence. Mary Whitford was in the darkroom at 414 Bainbridge, and someone hid that fact right there." As night fell, the office light illuminated the 1971 photo on the wall, Mary Ellen's smiling face in her student ID. Below it was the metal tag with M.E.W, now in an evidence bag. Those letters once again brought the case back from oblivion, and in the hands of the new investigators, the evidence was no longer hearsay, but the clear voice of a past emerging from decades of cemented dust. The forensic results, delivered in just days, sent a shockwave through the cold case unit. Lieutenant Leo Navarro didn't wait for the morning meeting to draft a warrant to research the old scene, 414 Bainbridge Street. If the wooden box was buried in the wall, there must be other traces inside. He wanted to see with his own eyes what his predecessor, Lieutenant Hanlon, had sensed only by instinct: smell of concealment. On March 15, 2014, when the warrant was signed, Bainbridge Street was much quieter than before. The old brick building was now part of a row of shops under renovation, but the third floor, once Thomas Keenan's studio, remained unused. The 6-person forensics team arrived early morning, equipped with modern tools, ground-penetrating radar, thermal scanners, and infrared cameras. The wall, where the workers found the box, was the starting point. As the radar scanned, the screen gradually revealed an anomaly: a hollow space between 2 brick layers, about 1.5 meters long and less than a meter high. No pipes or wires ran through it. The technician concluded, this cavity isn't part of the design, it could be a patched area. Navarro glanced once and ordered a probe drill. The cutting machine's noise echoed in the enclosed space, cement dust clouding the air. When the bricks were removed, a damp, musty smell poured out like a breath trapped for decades. Inside the cavity, a flashlight beam revealed an old wooden chair, its backrest broken, and small items mixed in thick dust. A technician bent down to pick up a thin silver metal strand, less than 5 centimeters long, resembling a broken necklace chain. Nearby was a dark stain on the cement floor, dried like chemical salt. On-site analysis showed it was a trace of silver halide developing solution, the same chemical found on the gloves in the wooden box. The team stood silent for a few seconds. Navarro crouched to look at the chair, gloved hand brushing the wood, dust flaking to reveal its old brown color. He knew this couldn't be here by chance. "Photograph, take samples," he said softly. 2 technicians immediately documented the area, sampled the chemical stain, and scraped the cement around the chair's base to date it. At the lab, preliminary analysis showed the cement in the cavity was mixed between 1971 and 1972, matching the time of Mary's disappearance and the building's reported electrical repairs. The chair's wood was dated to the same period, a type commonly used in commercial photo studios in early 1970s Philadelphia. The silver chain fragment, though small, matched the craftsmanship of a Walnut Street jewelry shop's designs from that year, consistent with a purchase receipt Mary's friend, Margaret Duval, still kept. Navarro meticulously recorded the results without a word. The room felt frozen in memory. Every wall, every cement patch seemed to tell a story the 1971 police couldn't hear. What they saw, chair, chain, chemical stains, wasn't much, but enough to confirm someone was here, and afterward, this place was sealed by the same hands that left those traces. That evening, the forensics team thermally scanned the entire third floor. While other walls showed uniform heat patterns, the area around the old darkroom reflected lower, indicating an added material layer. A technician looked at the screen and said, "This could have been a small doorway now sealed." Navarro silently studied the screen's image, a pale blue streak like a scar on the deep red wall. They finished the search near midnight. The room was resealed, this time not to be forgotten, but to preserve evidence. Outside, a light rain began, its soft patter like metal on a tin roof. Navarro stood at the door, looking back at the opened wall. There, the cement peeled, exposing old bricks, the last remnant of 1971. He thought of Hanlon's words, "No scene but smell of concealment." Now, after 43 years, they had found the source of that smell. The cavity behind the cement wasn't just physical evidence, but a sealed gap between two generations of investigators. When the lights went out, the room returned to silence. But it was different now. No longer oblivion, but the anticipation of justice drawing near. After the second Bainbridge Street search, Lieutenant Leo Navarro knew physical evidence was only half the truth. To complete the picture, he needed the voices of those who lived in that time, people who might still hold fragments of memory deemed unimportant 43 years ago. Only they could bridge the gap between that cement wall and the night of June 5, 1971. The list of living witnesses was compiled by investigator Alicia Boone from the old file. Of the 8 questioned in 1971, only 4 remained alive, 3 still in the Philadelphia area. Navarro and Boone embarked on a 3-day trip from the southern suburbs to the Schuylkill River dock, where old traces lingered faintly on the map. The first they met was Walter Briggs, former guard at the Schuylkill River Line dock, now 84. Living in a small apartment in West Philly, his memories still sharp. When Navarro opened the file, showing him a photo of Keenan's Crestliner boat, Walter stared long and nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember that boat," he said. "I saw it that night, around midnight." Briggs recounted that during his early morning shift on June 6, 1971, in light rain with the dock nearly empty, he saw a tall, thin man driving a green Ford stop at the dock entrance, open the trunk, and pull out something wrapped in tarp, about the size of a body. The man loaded it onto the boat, stayed about 15 minutes, then left. He remembered clearly because the boat wasn't registered for a trip, and the chemical smell from the item made him cough. "I thought it was photo equipment or something broken, so I didn't report," he said, voice lowering. When shown a current photo of Thomas Keenan, Briggs closed his eyes briefly and replied softly, "I'm old, but I'm 9/10 sure. It was him." The next day, Navarro visited Edna Crawford, the neighbor from the floor below the Bainbridge building, now 87, at a West Philly nursing home. She needed a cane to reach the visitor's porch, but when 414 Bainbridge was mentioned, her eyes lit up. "I've never forgotten that night," she said slowly. "Around 10:30, I heard the iron door slam, then a smell wafted down the stairs, acrid, like burning paint. I couldn't sleep all night. The next morning, I saw Keenan in the hallway, asked what happened. and he just smiled, said he spilled a chemical bottle. When Boone asked why she didn't tell police back then, Edna sighed. They came to ask, but I thought it was his personal business. I didn't realize that girl really vanished. The next witness was Harold Stein, owner of the Copper Cup Cafe where Mary worked. He still ran the shop, now managed by his son, though he worked morning shifts. When Navarro mentioned Mary, he went silent for a long time. I remember her clearly, he said. She was good, kind. The night she disappeared, I personally closed her shift. While cleaning the counter, she said, I have to meet someone one last time, then I'll be back early. I asked who. She smiled, said Keenan's name. I thought he was just a classmate. That statement, recorded in the minutes, hushed the cafe's air. Navarro looked around, picturing 1971, the young student leaving the shop, stepping onto the street, clutching her film bag, heading to a final meeting. Each witness's memory pieced together a near-complete timeline. Mary left the cafe at 10:15, was seen heading toward Bainbridge. Around 10:30, the iron door and chemical smell were noted. At midnight, Keenan appeared at the dock with a heavy load on the boat. Late afternoon, they drove to the suburb where Margaret Duval, Mary's roommate, lived. Now a retired teacher with white hair, her voice still trembled when mentioning Mary. I still remember that night, she said. Before leaving, Mary said she had to meet Keenan to return some original photos for her project. She said she wouldn't see him again because he was too strangely attentive. I told her to go with a friend, but she laughed. Mary always believed people could resolve things by talking. Navarro froze at that detail. The 1971 file had no mention of Mary planning to meet Keenan that night. The police then either didn't know or never recorded it. Margaret's account now perfectly matched the new findings, the final meeting, and the journey ending at Bainbridge Street. As night fell, Navarro and Boone returned to the office. On the whiteboard, he drew red lines connecting the timeline. 10:15. Mary leaves cafe, 10:30. Iron door noise. Chemical smell, 11:45. Green Ford at dock. 0 o'clock. Boat leaves Schuylkill dock. Beside it, he added, all point to Keenan. 43 years later, these aging witnesses told the same story, each detail they recalled fitting like the final links in a chain of evidence. None had met each other, but their memories converged on one point. The man named Thomas Keenan, the Bainbridge room, and a June 1971 night filled with chemical smells and deadly silence. After completing the witness interviews, Lieutenant Leo Navarro returned to the cold case unit headquarters with one question echoing in his mind. Could anything in the wooden box capture the moment Mary was still alive? Of the 4 pieces of evidence, the reel-to-reel tape remained unopened, requiring complex restoration. Now, with all the scattered witness memories pointing to one night, June 5, 1971, Navarro decided it was time to hear what was on it. On March 25, 2014, the metal tape canister was sent to the FBI's audio analysis lab in Quantico. Lightly rusted at the edges, the tape inside was stuck, its surface so worn it could crumble with a hard touch. Technician Ethan Kroll, experienced in restoring audio from cold case files, took charge. Under a magnifying glass, he gently unwound each loop, applied a magnetic stabilizing solution, and tested it in a vacuum chamber. The machine hummed, the audio needle twitched, the signal was still there. A nearly 2-minute stretch of static played, mixed with the hiss of an old motor and dripping water. At the 3rd minute, a young female voice emerged, faint, breathless. Tom, I don't do this anymore. Please open the door. A brief pause, then a male voice replied, low, steady, emotionless. You don't understand, it's just a few minutes. Sounds of shuffling, something falling, then footsteps. Next came the sound of metal scraping, likely the dark room's iron door. The tape cut off abruptly, followed by nearly 2 minutes of continuous static before stopping. In the sealed room, as the tape played, no one spoke. Navarro stood behind the glass, hands clenched. He didn't need the technician's confirmation. He knew the Tom, the female voice called, could only be Thomas Keenan. Technical analysis followed immediately. Crail used audio spectrum software to compare the male voice on the tape with Keenan's 1971 interrogation recording stored in the archive. Frequency patterns, rhythm, and pitch matched 92%. The mid-range tone and distinct T consonant emphasis were unmistakable. The scientific report concluded, very high probability, 90%. The male voice on the tape matches Thomas Keenan's voice, recorded in the July 1971 interrogation. Navarro listened to the tape 3 more times, each heavier than the last. The female voice, trembling, faint, at times choking. The male voice, chillingly calm. The way the man said, "Just a few minutes," sounded like a command, not reassurance. In that moment, life and death seemed separated only by the dark-room door. The audio was backed up in 3 digital copies, stored in the Philadelphia Police Department's secure vault. 1 copy went to the forensics lab, 1 to the city prosecutor's office, and Navarro kept the final one with the original file. At the office, he called the team together. Without lengthy explanation, he played the tape. When the "Tom, I don't" echoed in the small room, everyone fell silent. Boone bowed her head, scribbling. Duration, 4:13. Female voice pleading. Male voice cold. Static matches darkroom sounds. When the tape stopped, Navarro said slowly, 43 years ago, they smelled chemicals and heard the iron door. Now, we've heard that exact moment. There's no doubt Mary was in the studio, and Keenan was there too. The tape, though brief and fragmented, became the final piece linking all evidence: Mary's hair in the glove, chemical smells in the wall, the cemented cavity, and now the audio, undeniable proof. For the first time since 1971, Mary Ellen Whitford's disappearance was no longer a vague question, but had a voice, a person, a time, and a crime. Navarro stood before the window, gazing at the city night, holding a copy of the small reel-to-reel tape in a plastic bag. He thought of Lieutenant Hanlon, who had sensed the smell of concealment, but never had the chance to prove it. Now, the silence of 43 years had been broken. From the moment the iron door's sound echoed on the tape, there was no doubt Thomas Keenan was back at the center of the case, this time with no escape. After the reel-to-reel tape was restored and the voices identified, Lieutenant Leo Navarro knew he needed more than physical evidence. He needed to understand why. The tape captured only a moment of tragedy, but to convince a court, they had to prove intent, not accident. He contacted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit (BO) in Quantico, requesting assistance in building a psychological profile for suspect Thomas Keenan. A week later, Special Agent Dr. Hannah Levin, a behavioral criminology expert, arrived in Philadelphia. She and Navarro sat in a small conference room, facing stacks of documents: Keenan's 1971 interrogation records, the audio tape copy, restored Polaroid photos, and forensic reports from the Bainbridge studio. Levin flipped through each page, occasionally jotting notes. "He has a clear pattern of controlling everything around him," she said after reviewing the old interrogation. "When he couldn't control someone else, his first reaction was to erase their existence." The BO's initial analysis focused on possessive and obsessive behavioral patterns. According to Temple University records, Keenan was intelligent, ambitious, but often described as rigid, controlling. Some former students contacted by the FBI confirmed he had strained interactions with female students, overstepping advice, persistent messages, despite no response. No formal complaints were filed, but these small signs formed a pattern indicating an obsession with young women, particularly those who appeared independent or rejected his attention. Levin examined Keenan's personal file from his Temple days. Born and raised in Pennsylvania, mother died when he was 12, father strict and emotionally distant. Throughout his youth, he excelled academically but had few friends, showing extreme attachment to personal belongings. This is what we call an obsessive controller personality, someone who believes affection equals ownership, Levin explained. When rejected, they don't feel grief but offense. In internal discussions, the BOU reconstructed the psychological timeline of June 5, 1971. Mary, per her friends, wanted to meet Keenan one last time to return photos. She likely entered the studio while he was working in the darkroom. When she expressed her intent to end their collaboration, he reacted by isolating the space, locking the door, trying to control the situation, but escalating tension led to a complete loss of control. The voice on the tape, calm, cold, showed emotional detachment, typical of someone with latent violent tendencies. From administrative records, Levin uncovered a detail few noticed. In 1973, Keenan was reprimanded by the department for inappropriate conduct with a female student while teaching part-time. The matter was dropped without prosecution, but an internal memo noted, "Instructor shows controlling tendencies, monitoring, sending handwritten notes outside class hours." This behavior recurred with others in later decades. These old reports, now viewed by the BAU as a recurring behavioral pattern, supported the hypothesis that Keenan wasn't a victim of an accident, but someone who methodically built a cycle of possession, control, elimination. When Levin listened to the tape a second time, she closed her eyes, counting the silences between the voices. 8 seconds after she said, "Please open the door," he went silent. That silence says more than words. It was the moment he chose not to let her go. In her report to Navarro, the BAU concluded, "The suspect exhibits high possessive and controlling tendencies, reacting with violence when rejected. Behavioral factors, combined with physical evidence, suggest the victim was likely held against her will at 414 Bainbridge Studio and died in that space." At the office, as Levin presented the report, no one spoke for a moment. Everyone understood that this psychological profile completed the picture they'd sought for 2 months. Hair DNA, physical evidence, witness accounts, audio, now supplemented by motive and behavioral pattern, something missing in the 1971 investigation. Navarro closed the file, looking at Keenan's old photo at 24, a half smile, calm eyes. "He didn't kill out of anger," Navarro said softly. "He killed because he thought he had the right." Outside, Philadelphia was entering spring, but in the cold case office, the air was heavier than ever. Everyone knew, after 43 years, they had enough to bring Thomas Keenan back to where he once walked away, the interrogation room. When the FBI's behavioral analysis report reached Philadelphia, Lieutenant Leo Navarro knew the time to act had come. Every piece now fit physical evidence, DNA, witnesses, audio, and psychological profile. In late August 2014, he submitted the full reinvestigation file to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. The meeting lasted nearly 6 hours, each page scrutinized under white light. When the tape played, the female voice pleading, "Tom, I don't," echoed in the silent room. The district attorney said only, "Get the warrant." On September 9, 2014, the city Superior Court approved an arrest warrant for Thomas Keenan on charges of first-degree murder and concealing criminal evidence. After 43 years, his name appeared again on an official arrest warrant. Navarro received the copy, looking at the signature at the bottom, something Lieutenant Hanlon never got to see. 3 days later, on September 12, 2014, at 6:40 a.m., 4 police cars parked outside 9134 Evergreen Avenue in the quiet Chestnut Hill suburb. Fog still hung low, blue lights flashing faintly on the road. Keenan, now 74, had just stepped into his backyard when 2 officers approached. He didn't resist, only looked at the warrant in Navarro's hand and said slowly, 40 years, I knew this day would come." During the house search, the forensics team found a brown leather notebook in the study, its edges frayed. Among brief notes, a corner page had green ink, scrawled but clear, 66, closed darkroom. Below it were 2 initials, "Me," the same marking on the metal tag in the wooden box. The paper was sealed on site. No doubt remained, Keenan had left his own trace. Keenan was brought to Philadelphia PD headquarters at 9 a.m. In interrogation room 3, he sat across from Lieutenant Navarro and investigator Alicia Boone, who had followed the case for over 6 months. The room was softly lit, gray walls, with a recorder, file, and unopened water bottle on the table. For the first 3 hours, Keenan remained silent. Every question about Mary, the Bainbridge studio, the tape, was met with a blank stare. He only said, "I said everything I needed to in 1971. Navarro didn't press, he waited. As the clock neared noon, he signaled the technician to play the reel-to-reel tape. A faint hiss sounded, then the weak female voice, "Tom, I don't do this anymore. Please open the door." The room's air thickened. Keenan closed his eyes briefly, shoulders still, then his own voice on the tape, low, cold, emotionless, "You don't understand. It's just a few minutes." When the tape stopped, Boone leaned forward, voice soft but firm. "You know who that is, don't you, Mr. Keenan? And you know where this was recorded?" Keenan opened his eyes, staring at the wall, silent. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, slowly. Navarro began presenting each piece of evidence, not to persuade, but to force him to face reality. Hair sample in the glove matched Mary's DNA. Chemical powder in the glove and on the studio wall, same developing solution he used. Silver chain fragment in the wall cavity matched a gift Mary received in 1970. Close darkroom note in his notebook. Witnesses seeing him drive the green Ford to the river dock at midnight. And the tape, where his voice sounded alongside hers for the last time. Each piece was placed on the table, in clear plastic bags. Navarro didn't raise his voice, only said evenly, "You controlled everything in that room. But you couldn't control time. It kept everything. The chemical smell, the hair, the audio, your handwriting. Now, time is on her side, not yours." For the first time that morning, Keenan reacted. He stared at Mary's photo on the table, her young face, bright eyes, taken weeks before she vanished. His hand trembled, touching his collar. Then he said softly, "She didn't deserve that." Boone asked immediately, "Deserve what, Mr. Keenan?" He looked up, voice hoarse. "I just wanted her to listen to me." She panicked, then fell. "I didn't mean to. Not intentional, but you hid everything," Navarro replied. "You sealed the room. You left. You lived another 40 years. Why?" Keenan stayed silent for a long time, eyes fixed on the wall, as if seeing through time. The interrogation continued for 3 more hours. As evening fell, Keenan's appointed lawyer arrived. Just before being let out, he requested to speak privately with Navarro. The door closed, just the two of them. His old voice rasped, almost a whisper, "There are things you'll find under the floor. I don't remember clearly anymore, but I want this to end." Navarro looked at him for a long time, not responding. As Keenan was let out, he turned to Boone. "He just told us where to find the rest." That day, a brief news report on Philadelphia TV stated, a 74-year-old man was arrested in a 1971 missing person case. Police say the investigation is expanding. In the silent interrogation room, Lieutenant Leo Navarro knew they had crossed a new threshold, from suspicion to confession. For the first time in 43 years, justice had a name, a voice, and a tangible form, a silver-haired man with pale eyes, beginning to tremble before his own past. On the morning of September 13, 2014, after a night in custody at Philadelphia PD, Thomas Keenan agreed to cooperate with his lawyer. His voice low and hoarse, hands trembling slightly, the story emerged after over 4 decades of silence. He admitted to holding Mary Ellen Whitford in the 414 Bainbridge Street studio on the evening of June 5, 1971. "She came to pick up some photos," Keenan said, eyes on the table. "I wanted to talk, wanted her to hear me out," they argued. Mary demanded to leave, but he locked the darkroom door, continuing to talk as she pounded on it, pleading to be let out. That was the sound recorded on the reel-to-reel tape, Keenan claimed. "She struggled. I grabbed her arm. She fell. I don't know why she went silent." He said he checked her pulse, but wasn't sure she was breathing. In panic, he cleaned the scene, painted over stains, and the next day began sealing the wall, storing some items in the wooden box. Navarro stayed silent throughout the statement. When he asked, "Where is Mary's body?" Keenan looked up slowly. "South bank of the Schuylkill, near the old park, where I launched the boat." He described the night of June 6 into 7, driving the green Ford to the dock, pulling a sack about a person's weight onto the Crestliner boat, rowing half a mile downstream, landing at a low, grassy area. He dug a shallow grave, placed the body with a few small items, then covered it with dirt, stones, and dry grass. It was still raining. "I remember a rotted wooden post nearby," he said. That afternoon, the forensics and canine teams were dispatched to the area, Keenan indicated. Over 43 years, the landscape had changed almost completely. Part of the riverbank was reinforced. Grass grew thick, old paths gone. Using 1971 aerial photos, the team mapped the original area. 2 scent dogs circled, and after half an hour, both reacted at a patch near riverbank willows. Ground-penetrating radar detected an oval-shaped anomaly about half a meter deep. The excavation began in the calm afternoon light. Technicians peeled back soil layers, recording each step. At 50 centimeters, a shovel hit something hard. They switched to trowels, uncovering the first bone fragments, pelvis and femur. Then the spine and skull pieces. Near the sternum, they found a broken silver necklace with a beaded pattern. The smell of damp earth and metal rose. Everyone knew they had found what they sought. The remains were treated like an archaeological dig, orientation measured, photos taken at each stage, surrounding soil sampled. The body, now skeletal, lay on its side, arms curled, head facing the river, typical of a hasty burial. Near the left ribs was a small silver fragment, matching the chain piece from the studio wall. Under the light, it gleamed like a thread connecting the case's 2 halves. The remains were sent to the Pennsylvania Central Forensics Lab. Morphological analysis indicated a female, about 22 years old. Height matching Mary's file. The right temporal bone had a thin crack. Ribs V.E.W. Salmon showed minor fractures. No cuts or stab marks. The injuries weren't sufficient to determine cause of death. Heavy weathering made it hard to distinguish pre- or post-mortem damage. For identification, the genetics team used met DNA from the femur and a molar. The mitochondrial sequence fully matched Mary's hair sample, kept by her friend Margaret Duval, and her aunt's sample. Nuclear DNA STR testing, though degraded, showed a 99.998% identity probability. Conclusion: the remains were Mary Ellen Whitford's. Concurrently, material analysts confirmed the soil around the bones contained silicates and oxides typical of the Schuylkill Bank, proving the body was never moved from this spot. When Navarro received the results, he placed 2 photos on the table, one of the necklace from the riverbank, one of the chain fragment from the wall. The broken ends fit perfectly, proving the burial and confinement sites were part of the same event chain. On September 15th, Keenan was brought back to the interrogation room. In front of his lawyer, he confirmed the burial location. "I didn't think she was dead. By the time I realized it was too late," he said. Boone asked, "Why not call an ambulance?" He stared at the wall. "I was scared. They'd think I harmed her." Navarro didn't respond, only placed the excavation photo on the table. A minute of silence. Finally, Keenan whispered, "I didn't want her to vanish like that, but I made it happen." The interrogation ended without a clear confession of intent to kill, but the sequence of events and his partial admission supported the charges. Navarro stepped into the hallway, looking at the case map on the wall, a red line from the Copper Cup Cafe to Bainbridge, then down to the river dock. 3 locations, 1 journey, closing 43 years of investigation. The final forensic report, delivered 2 days later, confirmed cause of death, undetermined, due to prolonged decomposition. Bone marks consistent with blunt impact or asphyxiation from confinement. Burial posture and evidence align with suspect's statement. With this, the criminal investigation phase officially concluded. The Mary Ellen Whitford case was transferred to the prosecutor's office for trial preparation. In the cold case unit's final summary, Navarro wrote briefly, "Body identified, location matches statement, evidence links Bainbridge and Scoil case investigation closed." That afternoon, he returned to the office. On the bulletin board, old photos, Mary smiling on campus, the Bainbridge map, the wooden box, were taken down, replaced with a handwritten note, "Solved, September 2014. Outside the window, dusk fell on the Schuylkill's water, where the excavation team had just left. Navarro looked at the river's coppery glint, thinking of Mary, the 22-year-old student of 1971, and Lieutenant Hanlon, who wrote "Smell of Concealment" in his final report. Now that smell had been found, and the truth, though late, had been named. The Mary Ellen Whitford case closed its investigation phase after 43 years. The evidence once hidden in walls, the forgotten tape, and the scrawled close dark room in an old notebook, all became witnesses. That night, Philadelphia was quiet, only the steady river's flow, as if time had finally released the past. In March 2015, nearly half a century after Mary Ellen Whitford vanished, the Philadelphia Superior Court opened the trial of Thomas Keenan, 75, on 2 charges: second-degree murder and unlawful restraint, resulting in death. Courtroom 2 was packed. Local and national media were present. On the front row, Mary's only remaining relative, her aunt, Helen Connolly, 84, quietly held the reassembled silver necklace, its pieces recovered from the studio and Schuylkill riverbank. The trial began with a presentation by District Attorney Aaron Wexler, who had followed the case since its reactivation. She started with 1971, a young girl leaving a cafe, never returning, and a room sealed for 43 years. "We have her DNA in his glove," Wexler said, voice clear and commanding. "We have her voice pleading on the tape, the close darkroom note in his notebook, and his own admission of holding her in that room. There is no room for doubt." On a large courtroom screen, the prosecution displayed the evidence timeline, the wooden box found in the Bainbridge wall in 2014, containing gloves, Polaroid photos, reel-to-reel tape. DNA analysis, proving the hair in the glove, matched Mary's mtDNA. Restored Polaroid images showing Keenan's darkroom space. The reel-to-reel tape played in court, the weak female voice. "Tom, I don't, please open the door." The male voice responding, low cold, "Just a few minutes." The audio echoed in the courtroom, causing many to bow their heads. Mary's aunt wept softly. The prosecutor called FBI Special Agent Hannah Levin to the stand. She presented the behavioral analysis results. Keenan exhibited a pattern of possession and control, reacting violently when rejected. "He did not act out of accident," Levin said. "He acted to regain control when he felt challenged." Next, forensic expert Dr. Robert Kellner reported the bone examination result. Though the cause of death could not be determined, the skull and rib injuries were consistent with a fall from strong impact or being restrained. "There is nothing to prove this was a mere accident," he affirmed. Then, investigator Leo Navarro took the stand. He recounted the journey of reopening the case, from the wooden box found to the excavation by the riverbank. When the prosecutor asked, "Do you believe Keenan intentionally hid the crime?" Navarro replied succinctly, "I don't believe. I know." The defense was led by attorney Michael Garvey. He acknowledged the physical evidence linking Keenan to the scene but argued that there is no direct evidence for murder. He claimed the incident was an accident, and Keenan panicked, acted foolishly but without intent to kill. Garvey emphasized, no fatal wounds, no weapons, no direct witnesses. Only an accident in the panic of 2 young people. He requested the court consider the age and time factors of the defendant. When it was Keenan's turn to testify, he walked slowly, leaning on a cane, appearing thin and frail. Before the court, he repeated that he did not intend. "She pulled away, I tried to hold her, she fell. I thought she was still breathing. I was wrong for not calling for help." The prosecutor pressed, "Then what did you do with her?" Keenan fell silent. Only the soft hum of the recorder sounded. When asked about the tape, he said, "I don't remember turning it on. Maybe I wanted to record the conversation to protect myself, but I didn't stop." The arguments concluded after 5 days. The prosecution displayed one last time the map connecting the points: the cafe, Bainbridge Street, the river dock, the excavation site. "This is not a chain of accidents," Wexler said. "This is a chain of actions: deceive, confine, conceal." The defense could only plead for leniency. Garvey told the jury, "He has lived 40 years with his guilt. That is punishment already." Before deliberation, Judge Martha Leland reminded the jury, "You are not to judge the man he is today, but his actions on that June night in 1971. The 12-member jury left the courtroom at 3 p.m. 6 hours later, when the door opened, the entire courtroom held its breath. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor. We find the defendant Thomas Keenan guilty of second-degree murder and kidnapping." A sigh rippled through the room. Keenan closed his eyes, bowed his head. Mary's aunt clutched the necklace, tears rolling down but without a sound. In the sentencing the next morning, Judge Leland read slowly. The defendant took the life of a young person and concealed the truth for over 40 years. Justice does not expire with time. For the charges of second-degree murder and unlawful restraint, the court sentences to life imprisonment without parole. As police led Keenan out of the room, he turned his head, saying softly, "I'm sorry." Mary's aunt stood, replying in a near whisper, "Too late, but finally she's home." Outside the court, Navarro and Boone silently watched the crowd disperse. Navarro said quietly, "Hanlon should have seen this day." Boone nodded. He would know. Finally, the smell of concealment has been washed away. The life sentence without parole closed the Mary Ellen Whitford case after 44 years. The next morning's newspapers all ran the headline, "Justice for Mary, 43 years later." The darkroom closes. In the small room of the cold case unit, file P2114 was closed, labeled "Solved, 2015. And out there, on the Schuylkill riverbank, where grass had regrown green, a small marker was placed with a simple inscription. Mary Ellen Whitford, 1949-1971. Finally home. News of the Mary Ellen Whitford case spread like a wave across Philadelphia just hours after the verdict was announced. The next morning, major newspapers, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Daily News, and even national TV channel CBS, all ran nearly identical headlines. 43 years later, Philadelphia's most famous missing person case is finally solved. On TV screens, images of Keenan being escorted from court appeared alongside Mary's 1971 photo, her youthful smile, clear eyes. For many city residents, her disappearance was a distant memory, told like an unfinished story. Now, as the truth emerged, a sense of both satisfaction and heaviness enveloped everywhere. "No one thought he'd live to hear the verdict," an elderly person on South Street told a reporter. Nor did anyone think a case dormant for so long could be closed. The strongest reactions came from academic and legal circles, where Thomas Keenan once held prestige. Dozens of former students, old colleagues, and his mentees expressed shock and disgust. A veteran Temple University lecturer told the press, "Keenan was once respected, teaching legal ethics. Now we must face that he killed and hid a body while still teaching." Legal magazines quickly opened special sections on dual personalities in law, analyzing how someone could live a full life with a perfect facade while carrying undetected guilt. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia Police Department held a major press conference at Central Headquarters. Lieutenant Leo Navarro and investigator Alicia Boone appeared with FBI representatives. Behind them was a backdrop reading Cold Case Division. Justice never forgets. Navarro opened with a brief statement. "We didn't solve a case. We completed the work our predecessors couldn't finish." He detailed the tracing process, from the wooden box found in the wall to modern DNA analysis, audio restoration, and body excavation. Beside him, a screen displayed archival photos, the 1971 Bainbridge darkroom, cement cavity diagram, DNA results. Boone emphasized the importance of collaboration across investigative generation. "Without Lieutenant Hanlon's handwritten notes from back then, we wouldn't know where to start," she said. "It was the line smell of concealments in the 1971 report that helped us revisit the old direction." The press conference ended with a rare round of applause in police work. On the table, amid thick files, the metal tag engraved M.E.W was placed prominently as a symbol of the justice restoration journey. The Mary Whitford case quickly became a benchmark in FBI cold case training. A year later, At Quantico, new agents studied case P2114, Philadelphia 1971-2014, as a model for cross-era investigations. Evidence preservation, mitochondrial DNA application, and combining behavioral profiles with modern forensics. In the training materials, a final note read, "When time erodes evidence, human persistence is the only proof left." Media also mined the case's emotional depth. PBS aired a special documentary, The Girl from Bainbridge Street, recounting the journey from 1971 to 2015 through investigators, forensic experts, and Mary's old classmates. This documentary won a local journalism award for authentically reconstructing the power of faith in justice, even after nearly half a century. The South Street community held a small memorial right outside the Copper Cup, where Mary worked her last evening shift. Residents brought flowers, old photos, and a replica silver necklace. On the cafe wall, the new owner hung a wooden plaque, "In memory of Mary Ellen Whitford. Her light never faded." At Temple University, the art department where Mary studied established a photography scholarship in her name for female students pursuing documentary photography. The first award ceremony took place at the end of 2015, and in the speech, the dean said, "She told her final story through those who continue her path." As for the police, Navarro declined all personal honors. In a final interview, he only said, "We don't call this a victory. We call it completion." When the reporter asked what he remembered most, he replied, "The moment I first heard the tape, that pleading voice didn't leave me until the verdict. Now I can turn off the tape because she's been heard." At the end of 2015, during the Philadelphia Police Department's year-end ceremony, file P2114, Mary Ellen Whitford was closed in the presence of officers, FBI representatives, and the victim's family. A red seal was stamped on the last page, Solved 2014, Convicted 2015. The press ended the series with the same message. Navarro said at the press conference, "Justice may come late, but it still comes." 43 years of waiting, one generation of investigators passed, another continued. From the cement dust and chemical smell of the old Bainbridge darkroom, the light of justice finally shone on what was buried. The story of Mary Ellen Whitford became a symbol that time can fade everything, except the truth. And as night fell on Philadelphia, the Schuylkill River flowed slowly under the lights, reflecting the faint glow of the old bridge, once a secret grave, now a witness to a solved case. In the wind, perhaps someone still heard an echo of a familiar whisper, "Justice comes late, but it still comes." The Mary Ellen Whitford story shows why in America today, personal safety and community responsibility must go hand in hand. A seemingly small detail, Mary saying "Meet Keenan one last time," then stepping into Studio 414 Bainbridge, is enough to remind us that a peaceful ending isn't as safe as setting boundaries and choosing public places, bringing a friend along, or using police campus security escort services. Many campuses have them. The controlling signs Keenan showed that FBI BAU noted: obsession, locking the darkroom door, ignoring the pleas recorded on the reel-to-reel tape, are a pattern of power-based violence. Today, if you see someone controlling your time/movement/relationships, treat it as a red flag. Proactively contact Title IX, Victim Services, or 911. Regarding evidence, the case was solved, thanks to things thought outdated. The lock of hair Margaret kept allowed mtDNA matching, the wooden box hidden in the wall, the Note 66, closed darkroom audio tape, and new tech like ground-penetrating radar. The practical lesson: don't delete. Don't handle it yourself. Keep emails, messages, handwritten letters, voicemails, location data that could be your tape reel later. If renovating a house and finding strange sealed items, call the police, like the South Street crew did. For professional communities, especially legal education, the story reminds that prestige doesn't exempt ethics, need feedback mechanisms, anonymous reporting, and safety culture background checks. Finally, as the seal Solved 2014, Convicted 2015 proved, Justice may come late, but today's responsibility is ours. Thank you for following to the end of the over 4-decade investigation journey of the Mary Ellen Whitford case. Proof that the truth is never buried forever. Please subscribe to the channel to join us in exploring more mysterious crime stories where justice, though late, always comes.